Please welcome Nona Caspers.
What a lovely thing you have going on here. It's really lovely. The first semester that I haven't been teaching while this has been going on. So it's fun. Thank you for inviting me. Oh, you know, I got inspired by the guitar player, Jason. Do you want to start with a little song?
Yeah.
This is a song that I made people sing at my birthday. So I'll make you sing it. You'll catch on quickly. So this is the chorus. I'll do one little verse, and then we'll do another round of the chorus. Really, will you do it with me?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. We are everybody, we are everybody, we are everybody, everybody is us. Do it with me.
We are everybody, we are everybody, we are everybody, everybody is us.
We are nobody, we are nobody, we are nobody, nobody is us. We are all sitting in the poetry center. We are all standing on the planet Earth. We are everybody, we are everybody, we are everybody, everybody is us. We are nobody, we are nobody, we are nobody, nobody is us. I'm working on a manuscript called "This Isn't What I Came to Say," what you need to know, and it's coming out in these odd little pieces. They're not quite stories. They're not quite not stories. I mean, some of them are stories. Some of them are something in between. And they're in the voice of one narrator, and you're stepping into this narrator's life about a year after her lover Michelle died, and she moves around in time. But the space that I'm interested in writing into is this grief space that she's still inhabiting, which creates a kind of, probably most of you have experienced grief, that sometimes it can create this kind of luminous has this kind of luminous quality, and things can happen in that place. Time, which is so wildly subjective anyway, becomes lopsided. So that's what This Isn't What I Came to Say is about. And this little piece from it, these two were just came out recently in the Green Mountains Review. So I'm going to read the two shorts that are in that review. A pair of sunfish. There were days in my new apartment during the first months after my lover Michelle died when time was elastic. I would wake up in the middle of the night and think it was morning, or I would wake up in the morning and the room would be dark. One day I woke at midnight and the afternoon sun already lay across the living room. The building and streets and alley were quiet. I got out of bed and walked across the bedroom and into the living room and looked at the light. It was like a sheath of yellow fabric unfurled across the writing table, gray carpet, and small sofa. I walked in and out of the warmth, the heat rolling over me. I stuck my hand into the light, and it glowed and reminded me of a sunfish, and I stood there swimming my hand through the light, and then swimming both hands, a pair of sunfish, in the sunlight. There was a line in my palm I had never noticed before, a deep wrinkle that started at my wrist and went straight up to the padding at the bottom of my middle finger. It cut through the lifeline and heart line. I looked at the other palm. The line was there, but instead of going straight up to the middle finger, the new line on this palm curved toward my pinky. I sat on the floor, my upper body and head in the light, and my legs outside the light. I contemplated this arrival. Was I dreaming? I didn't know. Then I went about my night as if it were afternoon. I sat at my writing table and wrote on my thesis describing how the use of place in X differed from the use of place in Y. I talked about how place and time could not be split, one from the other, time being an inextricable element of place and place of time. For humans, time was, I concluded in an overly long sentence, the lung or skin of place, though as soon as I wrote that down, I thought, no, time was more like oxygen and place breathes it. I was beginning to get lost in my own ideas, which kept shifting as I looked back on them, or forward into the blank space on the page at the tip of my pen. Did time precede place, or did time need a place to spread into before it could exist? When I was finished writing about place, I got up and went into the kitchen. And even though the kitchen clock told me it was 3 o'clock in the morning, the light in the room said early evening. I began making supper. I opened a bag of split peas and added water to a pot. I washed and cut a zucchini, a red onion, a carrot, and a potato. The apartment building was quiet, and I could feel the other inhabitants sleeping. I could feel the sleepiness of the building and the sleepiness of the streets and the city, though I was wide awake and ready to eat supper. When the peas were cooked, I added the vegetables. I ate the soup at my writing table, which was now a dinner table. Evening began to sit in the room with me, the light fading. I read my book on the couch and listened and watched the day turn into night. The yellow sheath of sun vanished and the room filled with dust. I turned on a lamp and read some more. My mind began to wander, as it did at night, over the room and the building and the city, and then over the geography of my life. My mind was a field mouse, roaming the countryside, sniffing here and there, resting at hilltops and looking out over the vista of trees, rivers, and lakes. This roaming was a lot about texture and impression, completely restful, though I could sometimes make out a face or hear a snippet of conversation from the past. I heard someone say, "This is how you know when it's ripe." And another person said, "Welcome to the area." I saw Michelle's face, as I often did while I lived in that apartment, and still do on occasion, when I'm homesick or when I'm brushing my teeth in front of the hallway mirror or looking out the wide kitchen window into the green of my backyard. But that night something different happened. Her black eyes looked even more beautiful than when she was alive. Her hand reached toward me in the now dark room, and I took it. After a while, I don't know how long, the sounds of morning and the day rose up in the hallways. But I sat on the couch in my particular darkness and did not move one single muscle. I was a sunfish in the middle of a deep lake, hovering close to the weedy bottom between the reeds and boulders. I did not blink, I did not swallow, I did not breathe. A fifth woman. One day in the alley outside my apartment there was a party. 4 women and 1 man were drinking from a brown bag. I watched them from my writing table through my fingers like a mask. Earlier, I had been watching them through my scarf fringe, and before that, I watched them without anything between us. I imagined them as some kind of family. They had begun at 10 o'clock in the morning, and it was now 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Each stood in their original morning spot. The women formed a half moon around the man who leaned against the wall of the rooming house across from my building. The man was tall, unusually tall, and his hair was longer in the front, then the back, and dangled into the emptiness of their half moon. The women were shorter, even the two very tall women, and larger on the top than on the bottom, with barrel chests and narrow hips and skinny legs. They all had dark, straight hair, and they all wore jeans and colorful shirts. One of the short women was round as a ball. She wore a tight lime green shirt that sculpted her fat into sections, her legs sticking out in a way that made her look like a panda-shaped balloon. She rarely spoke, but she opened and closed her mouth in silent laughs as she leaned back into the alley. Another woman wore a bright fuchsia t-shirt, and across her broad back spread a painted toucan. The toucan was saying something, its bill wide open in speech, but I couldn't read the words. The woman next to her had draped a piece of fabric or a blanket over her head and shoulders, and every once in a while, as she spoke, her hands flew out, and the blanket slipped and she readjusted. At 1 o'clock, the man left, but he returned at 2 o'clock with a large bag of Cheetos. The hands of the blanketed woman were noteworthy, long and muscular. I began waiting for her hands to appear, and when they did, I leaned forward and thought about how she had obtained them. Michelle also had remarkable hands. I'd watch her rifle through a drawer, her long fingers like antennae. It was difficult for me to believe that her hands were dead. That day, the apartment felt like a sanctuary. The sofa and the table kept me company. I felt them doing something, like breathing. Certainly they had a relationship with the air. The sofa looked very friendly in the artificial light. It said something, but I didn't know what, a tight sound. The carpet, which was gray and often morose, did not seem morose that day, though I would not call it cheery. I walked into the kitchen and found on the bottom shelf of the refrigerator half of a stuffed squash and a thick piece of cornbread. I had cooked the squash and baked the cornbread a few days earlier, but I had forgotten that, and so for a moment it felt as if someone had come into the apartment while I was at work and had cooked a meal and left it for me, or as if the apartment itself was taking care of me. I sat on the sofa and ate the squash and bread. The party was still going on. Maybe they were having a reunion. They had found each other again, here in this city, in my alley. Once the voices flared up as if an argument was about to start, a fight, but a minute later they all started laughing. A lot of laughing in different tones and cadences. Some words I could understand. High knot, you know, and electrical something. I watched them on and off into the evening, leaning against the window pane. Just before the sun dropped under the horizon and the alley went dark, I noticed something new. There was an arm-length space between the round woman and the woman with the extraordinary hands. They seemed to be leaving a gap between them, wide enough for another man or a fifth woman to stand in. I stared into the gap until my eyes tired in the dark, but she never came. I got into bed and, without warning, they stopped talking. Maybe they had run out of things to say. There was a beat of silence, the first that day, and then the five of them began to hum, in tune and in harmony, the man's voice higher than the women's. I didn't fall asleep. I drew the covers over my face the way I liked them, so that I could feel the sheet flutter with my breathing, and so the heat from my lungs fell back over my skin.